All right, we're live. We're going to have a chat about Modern Arnis with Super Dan Anderson. Uh, I don't know much about Modern Arnis, truthfully, but there seems to be a lot of division, I suppose, and differences of opinion within the Modern Arnis community. And I'm here to sort of illuminate some of those differences and to give a stage for all sides of the argument. Here's Super Dan Anderson. Welcome. How are you?
Hey there. How you doing?
Awesome. Now, for people who don't know you, and all humility aside, can you talk to us about some of your accomplishments in martial arts? Who are you? What have you done? So that they can sort of take the opinions that you're about to express in context of history.
Okay. So I began martial arts in 1966. So this November will be 58 years in martial arts action, so to speak. I started out in karate, and then I made my black belt in 3 years. It was 1970. And between 1970 and 1980, I competed a ton. I won over, 70 grand championships when I stopped counting. And in 1980, I met Professor Remy Presas, who actually was the one who engineered, for lack of a better word, or transitioned me from being a striker, kick and punch person to a complete martial artist. And I stayed with Professor Remy up until the time of his passing in 2001. Let's see, in terms of credentials in Modern Arnis, I was promoted to 6th degree black belt in 1992. And then much later on, several years ago, I was one of 3, along with Brian Zawolinsky and Kelly Warden, who were promoted to Lakan Sampu by Roberto Presas, the last remaining Presas brother. And overall, my contribution a lot to the martial arts has been in the way of books and videos. I've done over 40 books. I don't know how many videos. And so when I look at legacy, let's say, as opposed to the Japanese hierarchy type of thing, I pass it down to the leading student, et cetera, et cetera. I'm an American. And so what I do is I do the American thing. And instead of having a cultural lineage, what I do is I've written pretty much about everything that I've done. And I'm still in the process of writing, still in the process of videoing. And the concept is, how can I make it easier for you? I'm also a bit of a historian, and I'm one of the longest continuously training students of Professor Remy at this point in time. How's that for a thumbnail?
Okay, now that's pretty awesome. Okay, so let me explain to you some of what I understand. Let's get right into it, by the way, right?
Okay, deep dive. Let's go.
The division might be. It kind of is a little bit similar to the whole JKD world, the conceptual JKD guys versus doing exactly what Bruce Lee did. This is my understanding of some of the division in Modern Arnis, is this whole art within your art idea, where you take your experiences in who you are, you take what Professor Remy taught you, and you express yourself through that curriculum. And then there's the whole, well, I have the fingerprint and I have the blueprint, and this is exactly what Modern Arnis is. So there are those two sides. Where do you fall into that division, if I may be so blunt as to call it that?
Yeah, you can call it a division. Now, where I fall into it is, let's backtrack to 1997. And at this point in time, what I did is I sent a fax to Professor Remy through Bob Quinn. Professor Remy was in Atlanta, Georgia. I sent him a fax requesting permission to form a subsystem. And anything, and I mentioned in there, I'm subservient to Modern Arnis. This is just my subsystem, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And he allowed it. And he said, okay. So now, when 2001 occurred and Professor Remy passed away, yeah, there was a split. There was a definite schism. There was IMAF Inc., which the Masters of Tappy Tappy, that was already splitting into Jeff Delaney being on one group, and the other 6 being the other division. Tim Hartman had already had his World Modern Arnis Alliance. Kelly Warden had his World Modern Arnis Coalition, if I remember that's the name of the. And I had the MA80 system. Now, if we take a look at one interesting thing, and this is one thing I stress over and over again, is that as opposed to many Japanese arts or even some Filipino arts, what Professor Remy didn't do is he did not get into what I call body sculpting or body contouring. Let me explain. If you take a look at, let's say, anybody from Balintawak Eskrima, they have a similar method of moving, regardless of whether you're with Bobby Tabuada, Nick Elazar, Bobby Tabamina, etc. You look at a Balintawak guy, and you look at a Balintawak guy and you go, oh yeah, I recognize that. Same thing with Cabalas Eskrima. Now, what Professor Remy was doing was he was bursting onto the scene. He was one of the first martial arts instructors to encourage cross training. So if you did Taekwondo, he did not mess with your structure, mess with your stances, etc. You did Japanese karate, you did Kempo. He didn't mess with any of that when he was teaching Arnis. So this was the first thing in terms of, let's say, creating a division later on, because as opposed to establishing a home dojo where you had to do certain things in a certain manner and look a certain way, he let everybody keep their own body structure, their own alignment, their positioning, etc., while learning modern Arnis. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing, the art within your art. Okay. I was around before the art within your art. And the fascinating thing is, and I was talking to a guy in LA, Mike Raplogel, who I'm going to be interviewing later. Mike was the one who came up with the phrase. Professor Remy was doing a photo shoot for Black Belt magazine, or I don't think it was Karate Illustrated, it's Black Belt magazine. And Mike delivered an offhand comment. Oh, you mean, that's kind of like an art within your art. And of course, Professor Remy was really good at marketing himself, and bam, he just jumped on that phrase. And then that became the catchphrase. Now, the fascinating thing here, I don't know about the rest of the country. I know in the Pacific Northwest, he never said, hi, I am teaching you this so that you will understand your Taekwondo, Kempo, Karate, blah, blah, blah better. Arnis is to help you make your stuff better. What he taught, and what would happen is people would come up to him with their own realization, their own epiphany. Oh, wow, when you do this particular action, this resembles the knife hand block. Oh, I understand that better. So the whole art within your art concept was more of, okay, how does the motion and the movements and the applications in Arnis, how can they help you understand your art better, as opposed to it being, let's say, a cross-training type of thing, or the purpose of Arnis was to make you better at yip, yip, yip. He constantly and repeatedly stated he wants to spread Filipino culture. That was his number one thing, spread Filipino culture. So,
I can see that.
and then the other thing is that you get the difference between art and science. Now, science, if the wheel is not round, I don't care if it's made by Firestone or any Goodrich or whatever. If the tire isn't round, you're in for a bumpy ride. That is science. Now, you add human beings to anything, and you're going to get differences of opinion. We all have different minds. We have different body styles. We have different life experiences. We have different abilities to absorb and teach and blah, blah, blah. So once human beings enter into it, I'll quote Ed Parker. I think he said it best. When pure fist meets pure faced, you have pure art. Okay, substitute pure stick meets pure head, you've got pure art. So, if you watch, Yeah, go ahead.
At the time when Professor Remy passed away, was there a complete codified modern Arnis system, period?
Absolutely not. There was what I call the shopping list. Now, the shopping list had the camp requirements. So you had the 12 basic strikes. You had the blocks, the disarms, the classical styles, all the different arm locks and throws, et cetera, that one was supposed to either know or whatever. But if you take a look at even going as far back as when the Butokukai in Japan in the 30s stated that in order to be a recognized Japanese karate system, you had to have a curriculum. Okay, you've got a white to yellow belt. What's the rank recs for white to yellow belt? Or yellow to green, or green to blue, or blue to pink, or whatever. There was none of that. What we had was the shopping list, and where you fit on the shopping list.
The same for every camp.
Say again, please.
Was this checklist or shopping list for the modern Arnis camps under Professor Remy, were they the same? Did they evolve? Was it a different list from one camp to another?
They were added to. They were. They were added to. Yeah. They were added to as. They were added to from different camps. The earliest one I've got, I think, is 1984. I think the latest one is somewhere in the 1990s. And as Professor Remy developed certain things, they were added to. A good example would be the tappy tappy capture bait capture configurations. Okay, those weren't in the 80s. That was a 90s thing. So they would be added to the 90s camp structure. The años, okay, años forms, empty hand forms 1 through 5. They were a, if I remember right, mid 80s thing, and then años 6, 7, and 8 came later, maybe late 80s, early 90s. So they would be added. So it was added to. So let's say there were core actions. Okay, that's the easiest way for me to describe it. Core actions. You got your disarms, you got your striking methods, you've got your stepping, you've got your años, you've got certain cane locks, certain cane chokes, certain takedowns, certain drills, and they were all thrown into the mixing bowl, where they figured as to a step-by-step progression. That was all on the individual instructor in the individual dojo.
Was he himself, was Professor Remy very well organized? Did he have his own notes, or did he rely on the people around him?
Okay. Let me tell you where he was organized. If you looked at, I believe, his left hip pocket, there was a notebook of seminars scheduled for a full year. That's where he was organized. He also had a list certificates that would go around. And, you know, so if you're promoted to any of the degrees of Lacan, boom, he had those. In terms of technical setup, right. No. He taught in what I call the confetti method. You have a handful of confetti, you fire it in the air, and whatever lands on you, landed on you, and that's what you took home. So from a Dan perspective, oh, he was disorganized as hell.
You know, that one way we can put it was he taught sort of in an ecological, dynamic, non-linear progression, which is, I think, really suits the Filipino martial arts concept as a whole, because it's so vast, right? You really needed to, and maybe, you know, when I envision confetti, it seems almost too random and scattered. I'm sure there was a process. I'm sure he knew the people who were there, and therefore sort of went with the flow of that day, that event, the people that were there, how they were feeling that day, perhaps. But I
would agree with that. Yeah,
I see that as almost an optimal way to teach individuals the Filipino martial arts. But I can also see how, you know, once the figurehead passes on, I can see why that can create division, because if we were to stick to this confetti analogy of yours, it seems to me like y'all are kind of comparing how many pieces of confetti you have and which pieces of confetti is more valid than the next. That seems to me.
I'm going to cut you off right there because unfortunately, that is the scene. And most of the modern Arnis instructors at this point in time recognize the skills and the applications of the others. You know, you get, okay, let's take Kelly Warden and myself, for example. You know, both of us, you know, Kelly better than I, and we couldn't be more different personalities than, I don't know who else. But the thing is, there's a recognition of the fact that we trained with the old man, that we have our certain core applications, etc. We have certain things that stick with us that we consider to be core modern Arnis. And we recognize and not only accept the other, but validate the other. And if you get guys like Roland Rivera, Brian Zawolinsky, myself, Bruce Chu, Bram Frank, etc., we all have this recognition and acknowledgement of where we went. Now, I'm going to go on a previous statement because I want to make a comment of that, but I didn't want to interrupt you. In terms of teaching the in a seminar setting, yes, Professor Remy hit it spot on. It wasn't the Dan preferred method, but the Dan preferred method and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. It was a brilliant method for him to reach everybody at once, and he was utterly brilliant.
Say that again. Say that again. I think there was some transmission issues. Say what you said again after the $5 and a cup of coffee.
Yeah. In teaching a seminar setup, Professor Remy he did the right way of doing it, enabled in the ability to reach everybody there. And right. Now, that's not the Dan method. Now, the Dan method, and this is the way I roll. I want the principle. I want the technique. I want the exactness. And he was more of a broad shoot guy. But the thing is, man, who reached that many people? I don't think anybody. I don't even think Guru Dan, who I absolutely adore, I don't think he reached as many people as Professor Remy, because Professor Remy would do this broad shoot type of thing. So what you get is you get an interesting combination of how it was taught in the Philippines, because I've studied a lot of recountings of different people training with different masters, and they all did the same thing. What do they want to teach that day? Well, they taught bing, 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 rather than following this American or Japanese linear progression. So,
yeah,
you know, once we get to our own schools, okay, we're going to teach how we teach, and you know, I'm very much in a step-by-step progression, and right. You know, some of those may also be as well, but you know, we're America. That's how we roll.
So the division amongst those who were closest to Professor, how would you characterize really what's at the core of that division? What is it? Is it ego? You guys all have big egos, big personalities?
Well, I don't know so much about calling it egos. I would say it's very definitely personality based. You know, right. There are very few people who my favorite phrase, and I can't even remember it. Oh, there we go. There are very few people who I feel incompatible with as a human being, and that's it. You know, I mean, that is fundamentally it. If you have, let's say, core values as an individual, who cares what the technique is? Who cares what the method of movement is? You know, it's like, okay, let me do a case in point. Okay, you and I don't know each other very well. I've been reading your posts, and what I see is a young, compared to me, Filipino martial artist who is finding his way, exploring things, not getting into dissing other people, but just stating statements or posing questions that that cause comment or thought. brilliant.
Right.
I can roll with
controversial.
that. I can roll with that. And so there is no personality difference between you and me. And like I said, I don't know you very well. You don't know me very well. But this is what lies at the core, in my opinion, as to, a bunch of the differences. Another case in point, somebody who I admire his passion, but I don't know from Adam, is Chuck Goss. The last time I had any kind of communication with Chuck Goss was back in 2002. He's one of the masters of Tappy Tappy. He's now a professor of Tappy Tappy. But his passion is killer. His passion is wonderful. Now, we don't talk. Why? Well, I don't know, because different personalities. We just don't talk. No good, no bad. I think this is more of the split in Modern Arnis than anything else. You either find incompatibilities or you find people you just don't run across very often.
What is, if you were to identify a common thread that all of you guys who spent time with Professor Remy, what might that be? It can be something specific. It could be a philosophy. It could be a method of how to train Modern Arnis. What would you characterize that as being? Despite your differences as human beings, you all have this because you all trained with Professor Remy. What is that?
Okay, the first thing is that I think we all had hands-on experience with an honest to goodness master. This guy, no matter who it was, in terms of the students, he could put us in his hip pocket anytime he wanted. Now, dig it.
Really?
Yes.
You guys weren't just respectful students, and there was none of this, because you know how it can be, right? You're in awe of this true legend, and you sort of throw yourself on purpose, or you're blinded by this admiration. Could that happen?
Let me tell you one of my favorite stories. And I told this over and over again, but this illustrates it perfectly. He and I were doing a drill one time, and we're just doing this back and forth drill, bing, 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 bing. And I don't know what got into my head. All of a sudden, I disarmed him, and I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is not good. I'm going to get my ass handed to me. He looks at me and smiles. He goes, Danny, that was very good, but you forgot one thing. I'm left-handed. The cane was in my right hand. He transfers the cane over to his right hand and takes my scrawny little butt to school with perfect control. I mean, he just jacked up the gradient. Now, talk to Kelly. Ask Kelly how much pain the old man put into him, because he was, right. and Kelly is nobody's fool. Brian Zawolinsky, nobody's fool. 27 years in the prison system, and he doesn't bend for nobody. And Professor Remy would put him in his other hip pocket because I took up space in the one and the other one. And so, yeah, no, this guy could manage us like nobody's business. So the first thing was having hands-on with a master. Now, I think I can speak for everybody, but that gives us an example of what to shoot for. If I can replicate as close as possible what Professor Remy did, that gives me something to shoot for. Am I there yet? No. Am I in progress? Yes. Might I get there before I die? Who the hell knows? But who the hell cares, because it's the journey. And it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's me or my favorite internet critic, or we all have that experience. We all share that experience. We all have a pinnacle to shoot for. And I would say that's the first thing.
Were there people at that time around Professor Remy that were incredibly skilled, but maybe aren't as vocal as a Hartman, as a you, as a Warden, as maybe even a Shishir in Akala? Do those people exist?
Absolutely.
Where are they? hear from them.
Well, they're more public now, but
Okay.
one of them is in, I keep forgetting, it's North Carolina or South Carolina. Roland Rivera. Okay, Roland Rivera. Structure, timing, simplicity, straight to the point.
Right.
This guy is something. This guy is very, very good. Bruce Chu from Orlando, Florida. Man, oh man, this guy can move. And those are two that are right off the bat that come to mind right off the bat. Now, Bruce and Roland, we, meaning, me and Brian and Bram and several others, have all gotten together. Oh, Chad Bailey. Chad Bailey's another one out of, is he down in Clearwater or thereabouts? Something like that. But all these guys have become more visible lately. I don't know how vocal, but visible. Some of us are more vocal than others.
Right. Clearly.
Yeah. And if you get me talking, I get talking more than others.
Well, I think this is important. This is important. I'm intrigued by all of Filipino martial arts. Right. I have no stake in Modern Arnis. I'm not a student of Modern Arnis, but it seems like for me, it's an education into possibly, right? Because now that I've ventured into teaching myself and I'm trying to develop a methodology and process, I want to learn from what may be deemed as mistakes, right? Like Professor Remy wasn't perfect. I want to try to avoid some of these pitfalls, and I come across sort of the same kinds of stories. And truthfully, the more I come across them, I question my ability to not make those same mistakes, because I think that somebody like Professor Remy Presas, someone like Grand Tuhon Leo Gahe, it was a part of their success is that they had these flaws in things like disorganization and having that ability to make the person standing in front of them feel like they're the only person in the world, and to be able to pass on his knowledge almost even in a seminar setting, almost in a direct one-to-one or personality to personality way. And so I don't think you can necessarily have the best of both worlds. You can't be supremely.
I think so. I think one can. Yeah. Because see, one of the things that, if we talk about weaknesses, organizationally, Professor Remy was not a leader. He was not a leader. Hey, Kelly, how you doing, buddy? Organizationally, he was not a leader. So what we didn't have an organized hierarchy. Yes, we had the belt ranks, but this connection that Professor Remy made with each individual, and he was brilliant at making each individual feel very, very special, which is like, he's so heads and tails over me than that. But the thing is wherein did anybody lie in the pecking order? Nobody knew. What you had, hey Kurt, how you doing? Every student felt they were very, very high up in the pecking order. But the thing was when he passed away, how can everybody be high up in the pecking order? So let's say in your situation, let's say you have for lack of a better term, you have a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And those who are at level 1 know that they're at level 1, no matter how well you got along with it. Because let's say if Henry, just give a name here, if you and Henry were good buds, man, you guys drank the same kind of coffee, listened to the same kind of rock music, et cetera, et cetera. So what you had was this personal connection that was deeper than some of your level 1 guys. But in terms of the hierarchy of the Rubio system, my term, not yours, the moment you got hit by that bus because you weren't looking both ways, we know who is the guy who's at top. You do that, and you will avoid that huge mistake that Professor Remy made. Now, that being said, let me add one more thing. That being said, that created an opportunity for the rest of us to develop like nobody's business. I don't think
Yes.
any of us would be at the position where we're at, skill-wise, knowledge-wise, experience-wise, if the organizational hierarchy had been there. So
Yes. Yes, exactly. It's sort of, the analogy that I draw from this, and the same thing that I do from a system that I'm closer to, which is Pikiti Tertia, with the way Grand Tuhan Leo Gahe handled his top guys, is he made them all feel like they're the favorite grandchild, And so when he passed away, it was like, who's going to lead? Who's going to take over some of Grandpa's role? He really made you feel special. He really made you feel empowered. And so in his absence, y'all are sort of, butting heads. He may have told you different things at different times. And that's what pushed you guys also to prove how good you were, not just to yourselves, but to one another. And what I'm seeing now is sort of an extension of this. When I listen to Datu Tim Hartman speak, or you or Kelly Warden, sometimes some of it is more humble expressions than others. But at the heart of it, this is who Professor turned me into. This is what makes me valid and good. And you're almost trying to prove it to one another, but you kind of don't need to. But there's still that remnant of y'all being just grandkids of Professor Remy, built out of love and respect and admiration. And for me, what I see, despite your division, are you guys are brothers. That's undeniable.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're kind of a fractured family, and I don't know. I don't quite roll with the idea of needing or wanting to prove it to others. I think that Professor Remy laid the groundwork for the rest of us to do our explorations, and very much like you, but way older than you. I've studied a lot of the concepts and principles of other FMAs so as to understand what I'm doing better. And, Kelly's done this, Brian's done this, a whole bunch of us have done this. And the only negative thing, and I've seen this sitting on the sidelines with Pikiti, is that, it creates a fracturedness. The gang's not all there, so to speak, because the main guy isn't there to be the glue that holds it together. But if you take a look at, historically speaking, that's the way it is with all the martial arts. How many branches does Shotokan karate have, for crying out loud?
Right.
You have one Gichin Funakoshi. Boom, we have a scat of Shotokan karates. We have one Anchan Bakon. How many Balintawaks are there? No good, no bad. This is actually historical precedent, and the concept of it all remaining the same, locked in this little acrylic cube, it doesn't happen.
Is it a problem to be solved?
Say again, please.
Is it a problem to be solved or addressed moving forward generationally? Or do you think it's fine? The division is part of it. The infighting is part of it. It's kind of part of what breeds greatness. So is it a problem to be solved or no?
I don't think so. I know there are several people who would absolutely adore having one organization, one leader, one master, one way of doing things. But if you do that, then what you end up with AI in humanoid bodies. It's the personalities,
right,
and the personal approaches which create the greatnesses. It's like, okay, let me make an example. Michael Jordan. Who else is Michael Jordan? You can teach Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan can teach blah, 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 blah. But there's only one Michael Jordan. Or my favorite, Larry Bird. Watch Larry Bird. Who moves like Larry Bird? Who passes like Larry Bird? Blah, 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 blah. And how many banging of heads did these guys have? They were on the shoulders of, they proceeded on the shoulders of giants and became giants themselves. Well, those of us who are on the shoulders of Professor Remy become either giants or we don't become giants. Let me be a self-proclaimed giant, okay? What? Before anybody gets crabby at me. But the thing is that it's it's a whole personality thing. And do I think it's a thing to be solved? No, I don't. All the crabbing amongst one another, there's actually very little of that now. Boy, you should have seen it after the old man died. Woo! What a shit show.
Yeah, I heard.
And
yeah. And we're approaching that in Tersha, by the way. Grand Duhan is still here, but he's in his mid 80s. So I suppose a lot of folks are preparing for that tidal wave of what happened with Modern Arnis back when Professor Remy passed. It's
well, the only advice that I could give, there's two phrases. One is not mine, and it's called "That too shall pass." All the exponents, it'll pass. And the other thing is that I'm going to rip off Kelly Warden here. He just says, "Do your own work." And where did he get that from? he got that from Professor Remy. Do your own work.
Yeah.
That will cause things to rise to the surface. All the amount of yap and $5 will get me a cup of coffee. You do the work, it will show. It will show in your own expression. It will show in your students.
Right.
And if somebody wants to complain about it or get touchy or whatever, hey, that is what it is. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, okay?
Ask me anything.
It relates to the greatest shot that Modern Arnis has at longevity. And let me give you these options, okay? So among these two options, which is the greater shot of Modern Arnis, the name, the history and legacy of Professor Remy, which involves you all because you guys were first generation students of his. What is the greatest shot of that being preserved for another 100 to 200 years? Option one is that the spirit of Modern Arnis continues to pulse through your students and they honor it and blend it with their own expression, or a standardized, finite Modern Arnis system that's codified on a manual.
I won't choose either one. I'll choose several. Bruce Jutnick, and I could just punch him dead in the face for this because he came up with this before I did. And he said, if you want to preserve the art, preserve the spirit. Okay, that's the first thing. And I wish I would have said that. But he definitely said that before I did. Now, the other thing is that there's a combination of two things. Now that we're in the 21st century, as opposed to the 20th century, you have organizations such as, IMAFP, International Modern Artists Federation, Philippines. Okay, you have DAV, the German organization. Okay, those are two very big organizations with very well-structured curriculums. Now, you also have the ability to reach people with what you and I are doing right now over the internet. So you have that as well. So you've got this multifaceted approach. Number one, preserve the spirit. What was the spirit? Well, Professor Remy was inclusive. He was inclusive of techniques, but he was inclusive of people. And he recognized and acknowledged the value of anybody's progression, whether it was the lowliest white belt or the highest black belt, etc. So what you've got is you've got a spirit there. And then you've got, the organizational schools who have their curriculums in the 21st century, okay, my writings and videos, they are a way of preserving a technical point of view. And then you've got the one-on-one get-together across the world via the internet. I think at this point in time, the preservation of modern Arnis has never been stronger due to the, how do I put it? Due to the availability of instant communications.
Right.
How's that for an answer? Yeah.
You didn't really answer the question, but I kind of like your answer nonetheless, right?
Well, I did not choose between the options that you gave me because I have a different opinion. And that's what makes you and I two very different personalities who can get along. You said either preserve the spirit or preserve the curriculum. It's like, no. It's broader than that to me.
So we've already established that, in your opinion, there is no finite, standardized, codified modern Arnis curriculum, and that you referred.
My opinion, yes.
And that you referred to the checklist that was prevalent in those camps, right? But we also
the shopping list.
The shopping list. Now, if Professor Remy didn't pass when he did, can we agree that those shopping lists would have evolved and changed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Professor Remy, he was a sponge. He learned. I saw the progression of the art, and I'll just make one observation. Before he met Wally J, his locks were larger and more circular. Then he hooks up with Wally J, who became just a lifelong, very, very close friend. And man, did things tighten down and get more painful. That was Wally J's small circle influence on modern Arnis. Later on, he included some of the pressure point stuff from George Dillman. Who knows what he would have added? Yeah. Oh, it would have changed. Absolutely.
Let me ask you a tough question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were, you just have to sort of accept the question as is. Okay. No diversion kind of answers. Okay. It's going to be a name. The answer is going to be a name. So here's my question. If you, Dan Anderson, were magically granted the authority to delegate a unified leader for all of modern Arnis, and it cannot be you, who would you pick today?
In the United States, Brian Zawolinsky. Brian Zawolinsky. He was one of the masters of Tappy Tappy. He's probably one of the most straight up guys that I know. He does not get into any of the political mess, and he's got a square head on his shoulders. I'd pick him.
So skill,
and you notice I said that without hesitation.
No hesitation. Thank you for answering that question.
Yeah.
And say his name again.
Brian Zawolinsky. Zawilinsky. He's in Cromwell, Connecticut.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have me as a leader. I'm not an organizational guy, and I tend to be like really nitpicky when it comes to execution of moves. So I'd probably piss people off. Even Professor Remy told Fred King, Dunny does not teach with enough love in his heart.
I like your answer. I would be curious what the others might have to say. If they can't choose themselves, who would they delegate? And wouldn't it be interesting if they all chose the same person? Maybe.
I think it'd be fascinating as all get out. I think it'd be, and it's funny because I don't think anybody has ever posed that question before. I think you're the first, at least in my hearing. Yeah.
Well, there you go. If I know Tim Hartman is watching, and Datu Tim and Datu Kelly is watching, I can contact Datu Shishir. We competed in his tournament recently, but isn't that an interesting question? If you can't choose yourself, who would you delegate? And I think it's interesting because you alluded to skill, knowledge, and character being a really important one, right? Because it couldn't be
Yes, sir.
somebody, the personality couldn't be too big or too, yeah, too big. Let's put it that way. And somebody who
Well,
really cares.
let's say overbearing. You know, the personality couldn't be overbearing. They'd have to really be accepting of those under their
Right.
care.
Was Professor, what was he like? Did put it this way: if Professor Remy was just another modern Arnis guy alive today, and he wasn't Professor Remy, would he choose himself to be the leader of modern Arnis, or was he self-aware to know, I wouldn't do that to those guys?
Boy, oh boy. I don't know because he was the founder. I mean, it's a funny thing, Paulo. That now
It's a funny question.
I'm going to draw on my own experience. Okay, you know, back in the ancient days when dinosaurs ruled the earth, I split off from my instructor, wrote a book called American Freestyle Karate: A Guide to Sparring, and then titled what I taught, American Freestyle Karate. So, in a sense, I was the founder of that method of karate. Now, when I sit back and I look at it, I go, well, who would I delegate to be the head of American Freestyle Karate? It's like, well, I founded it. Come on, give me a break. You know? So I think Professor Remy would probably have the same viewpoint as Paulo, he just mine. I have done it.
You think so? I mean,
I think so. It was his baby. It was his brainchild.
Okay. But you don't think he would have the awareness that maybe he, at this point in time, remember, we're kind of playing with time here, right? And alternate realities, right? And I'm just talking about not Professor Remy Presas, but just Remy the human, and understanding human dynamics. And him being outside of his creation. This is kind of philosophical, almost religious, right? If he was pulled out of that, and now it's just Remy, the human being, observing the things that are happening now with this system that he loves, that he didn't create, who would he choose? And that's kind of an interesting question, because you still think he'd choose himself?
I think if he popped out of his body and he looked at us and he saw the divisions in this and that, he'd probably scratch his head, shake his head sadly, and go, "Come on, guys, you know, who would he choose? Who would he choose? I don't know."
Do you think he would be the type of guy who? Do you think he would be the type of guy who, based on this question, would just choose his closest buddy at the time, his closest friend, and maybe approach the question from that lens? Maybe not the best person, but the person who is closest to his heart? Is that the kind of human that he was?
Possibly, but I think he demonstrated what he might do when he went back to the Philippines in 1998 or 1999, and rustled up a number of the old students, you know, Cristina Vasquez, Renee Tongson, Bambit Dulay, and so forth, and had them form the organization. Now, one of the things that you know, it's funny. As an American, it's really easy to ignore somebody else's cultural upbringing. Remy Presas was in the United States since 1974, 75, but he was Filipino. He goes back to the homeland and he sets up this organization, or he has the guys set up the organization because he wanted the preservation of modern Arnis. It was not a subchapter of IMAF Inc. You know, it was, in fact, I even spoke to Renee Tongson about this at length, and it was set up as its own independent entity, and it was for the preservation of modern Arnis. So, in reflection to your question, who might he have picked? Perhaps
A Filipino?
organizationally, IMAF Philippines, and if Cristina Vasquez, who was his highest ranking student there at the time, he might have picked him. He might have picked Renee Tongson as a president, so to speak, because Renee he's a businessman. He's very organized.
Right.
I think he would have picked somebody from the home country, because deep down in the very heart of hearts, Professor Remy lived in the USA, but he was Filipino. That was his upbringing.
And you also mentioned earlier in the interview, like that was, if we can characterize his primary objective was to spread culture, right? The Filipino.
Oh, he said that over and over again. He wants to preserve, he wants to spread Filipino culture. When he was younger, he was dismayed at the fact that judo and karate were so popular in the Philippines. He didn't complain about basketball. Well, okay, that's because basketball is not martial arts unless you're throwing some elbows. But the thing was that his beloved art, this Filipino martial art that he absolutely adored, was being overshadowed by judo and karate. So where else but the United States, which had just this tremendous wealth of martial arts practitioners, where else can you really, really make a firm toehold as far as Filipino martial arts goes? Bingo.
Well, let me share something.
But he did go back to the homeland. Yeah.
This is something for you and all of you Modern Arnis higher up guys, right? If Professor Remy's primary intention was to really spread Filipino culture in the United States, you guys are doing a great job in that it's kind of Filipino culture to have these little quarrels with our family and to express our opinions, right? But at the end of the day, if you can remember that y'all are brothers, if there was somebody external from Modern Arnis who was talking shit about Modern Arnis, I'm pretty sure as brothers, despite your differences, you would rally against this dude. And that's as Filipino culture as you can get, It's that, hey, we talk shit amongst each other, but nobody else is allowed to outside of us, or we're coming after you. So
you go after the family, and the family members will get cranky with you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. We got some questions here from the comments.
Yeah.
Okay. So
go right ahead.
Justin, does Modern Arnis have a similar situation with Pikiti Tertia where higher ranking members are not or may not be as skilled as lower ranks?
Okay, so the first thing is that I am only peripherally aware of any situation in Pikiti Tertia, so my comments regarding that would be uneducated at its best. Now, as far as the higher ranking guys are less skilled than the lower ranking guys, not that I've seen, but I'll tell you right now, Remy taught so many people that I am sure that there are a number of people who are not very well known, who are just absolute wizards. Absolute wizards. So, if we had the Intergalactic Modern Arnis Conference, how do you like that for a title? If we had the Intergalactic Modern Arnis Conference where everybody showed up, oh, I bet there would be some stunners. And there would be some people who could potentially be better than any of the rest of us. But is this something that is a prevalent thing in terms of the lower skilled guys being better than the higher ranked guys? For the moment, I'll go out on a limb, and I would say I don't think so.
Well, that's good. Because, speaking about what I know from Pikiti Tertia, that's a prevalent thing in Pikiti Tertia. You have,
I assume they'll sort it out.
Yeah.
Things even out in the end.
Sure, absolutely.
Next question.
Yeah, well, I was going to springboard off of Justin's question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe you may have already answered it, but is skill and knowledge in Modern Arnis directly correlated with the amount of time you spent with Professor Remy?
Absolutely not. And here's the interesting thing. Now, I know where this is going. There is the ability to absorb the teaching and replicate and then advance beyond that. Let me take Kelly. Okay, I could speak about myself, but let me take Kelly. Kelly was a skilled martial artist. He was also a thumper and a banger, and then he hooks up with Professor Remy. Okay, now he had X amount of skills that would allow him to look at, view, and absorb the training that would be faster than, let's say, Joe White Belt, somebody who had come up with no other type of experience whatsoever.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I was 14 years. Now I'll talk about me. I was 14 years in karate. I was a 4-time national champion during the golden era of karate competition, where you had to adapt every damned weekend because somebody was coming up with something new. So I learned how to view people, how to mold my body into what I had to do in order to win, etc. Plus, being a defensive fighter, my observational skills were like second to none. So the ability to absorb based on one's prior experience plays huge in this.
Huge.
And the amount of hours,
Absolutely.
now the amount of hours that you spend training, okay, yeah, I mean, if you don't work, you don't get the result. But the ability to watch and see, Lauren Christensen, my very first teacher, who's also very well known in Real Deal, he said, yeah, Dan's a natural learner. Fred King, he looked at me one day and goes, do you pick this up by osmosis? No, my ability to look, observe, see what's going on, and then replicate it in the physical universe is what it is. Does one need to spend 30 weekends out of the year with the old man, hands on? Well, that helps, but is that the only thing? I'm sorry, no, because otherwise, what we have is that we don't have that one aspect. You know, how can you absorb? How well can you absorb, etc. So anyway, there you go.
I completely agree with you. And I'm just going to put it more bluntly than that. Some people just aren't as smart or adaptive as others. Period. Even if two individuals started at equal playing fields and they spent the same amount of time with Professor Remy, it would not have been guaranteed to acquire any of his skill or his knowledge or his charm at the same rate. Right?
Right. Well, you've got personalities, you have personalities, and you have aptitudes, and that's what happens when you throw human beings into the mixing bowl. You know, we're not AI, we're not automatons. You know, so we're not going to pick up everything at the same rate.
Right. I think this is logical, but despite that, we still live in the martial arts world, and it seems like the prevailing currency of credibility is how much time we spent with the grandmaster.
Well, you know, okay. I mean, that's
or at which
how can
point,
I say this? How can I say this delicately? That's a load of shit.
It is a load of shit.
I mean, it's one's abilities are what they are. You know, it's like let's take a totally different venture. How many YouTube videos have you seen of an 8-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid playing some just terrific 12-bar blues? Hey, that kid didn't spend a whole lot of time with anybody. Yet this kid is just ripping some blues lick, etc., etc. Aptitude, ability, potentialities, and so forth. They're all in the mixing bowl when you involve human beings.
So would it be a fair piece of advice for me to give potential students of Modern Arnis to go, hey, look, forget about ranks, forget about titles, right? Consider them to some degree, but really look at the individual, look at their students, look at what they can do now, and let that be the ultimate guide for who you select as your instructor and your guide in modern Arnis.
Absolutely. Because the thing is that one, the students are going to reflect the instructor in terms of teaching skills. Number one. Number two, who is it that you resonate with?
Right.
Personality wise, this is going to be huge. Who do you get along with? If you get, let's say, if you find Henry Hank to be abrasive, well, you're not going to be you're not going to want to be around that guy. So you go to Joe Johnson. You go, I like this guy. Now I like this guy's students. I'll work with this guy, and that's the. I think that's the main thing that you do. That's
How many years did Professor Remy Presas spend in the United States teaching, traveling, doing seminars?
He either arrived here in 1974 or 1975, I forget which, and he passed in 2001. I think he stopped his seminar teaching in 2002 after he got diagnosed with his brain tumor. And he basically really burst onto the scene roughly 1980 or so, 80, 81, something like that. So he had a good solid 20 years out of the 26 or thereabouts that he was in the West.
Wow. Did he make good money doing those seminars for the time?
He made a buttload of money. One of the things that Professor was really good at was making a buttload of money. And now he was also good at spending it. And he's also good at hiding it. At hiding it. It's like there's all sorts of caches of money with it, bank accounts that he had and so forth that, people are trying to rustle up for the will and that kind of thing afterwards. But he did very well by himself. You figure.
Did he wear gold chains and watches when he walked into the seminars? Was he like that kind of, because a lot of, we call it forma in Filipino, like did he look good? Did he wear nice threads? And then boom into that.
He was the times that I saw him, he was relatively low key. What you'd see is he wasn't a Filipino gangster, okay? He was
I thought he might be. Okay. Man. He must have had like, I don't know his marital status, and maybe that's not something that we should get into. But because I don't know anything about it, I can ask. You don't have to answer. But was he like?
Yeah.
Did he love the women? Like, were there groupies that would show up and just wanted a piece of them, kind of thing? From your perspective.
Okay. Well, I will tell you from personal experience.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. Now there are others who would say differently. I know that he had a wife, 2 kids up in Victoria, BC.
Okay.
I know at least in the Portland area where I was living at the time, I did not see it.
Okay. I'm not talking about infidelity, but just kind of like that charm, like he would do a little flirting. And I'm just curious about this man, like what was he like as a human being? Did you ever go out to dinner with him? What was that like?
Yeah, when he was off the stage.
Yeah.
Okay, when he was off the stage.
Right.
He around me, he was pretty chill. I think he was so damned busy that he liked to relax.
Did he
drink?
Liked
to sit. No, not when I was around him. No.
Okay.
In fact, I think I had more beers around him than he had. I think he would drink more of like a soda pop or something, and like that. Yeah.
Smoke cigarettes? Was he ever a cigarette smoker?
No, he wasn't a smoker that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, not in my presence. No.
Okay. Oh, man. So the reason I asked how long he taught for was, can you identify in your opinion, what the prime years were based on those 2 decades, where he evolved enough, he modified enough, he was strong enough, motivated enough, where you can go, you know what, the years between 1989 and 1995, like what would you call that?
Okay, well, if you're talking about his energy, presentation wise, etc., it was from the first day I met him. I mean, there wasn't any of this shy, retiring Remy Presas kind of guy building into seminar confidence and blah blah blah. No, when he hit the floor, he was the man. Up until the very last time that he and I shared a teaching gig. Yeah, I think I was in Philadelphia in '97. In '97, I went off the seminar circuit to raise my baby girl. And it was one of those, am I going to be, am I going to be a good dad, or am I going to be what I call a seminar rat? And I use that term affectionately because I was a seminar rat. A lot of us were seminar rats. We'd hit all the ones that we could. But I'd made a choice. So between the time that I had the first seminar to the last time I was around him, he was as giddy up and go, as dynamic, as confident, as charismatic.
That's great.
And he was quite something. He was very, very singular individual in that respect.
That's amazing. Let's see. I'm gonna get to the rest of the comments here. So the last one was from Justin. The next one is, the son student at some point must come out of the shadow of the father / instructor, kill the boy, become the man.
All right, quoting Game of Thrones. Come on, Kurt. It's not so much kill the boy, become the man. It's that. I mean, at some point in time, if one trains long enough, one finds their own voice. And what do I mean by finding your own voice? Okay. Combat, as you well know, is chaos. Okay. It's just complete and utter chaos. You have pain, you've got the physical emotions, you've got emotions, you've got adrenaline, you've got this, that, and the next thing all going on. And so what you do is you find a point of reference for that chaos. Whatever martial art you take, it could be karate, judo, whatever, but that's your point of reference. All that is how you look at violence. Okay, I'm gonna block the guy, I'm gonna throw the guy, I'm gonna choke him out, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then you start adding to the toolbox, but you're still doing, for lack of a better term, you're still doing Shotokan karate. Then at some point you end up doing, Dan Shotokan. Well, you're still doing Dan Shotokan, but you've added things, discarded some things, etc. And then you finally morph to a point where you're doing Dan style. And when you get to the confidence level to the point where you could really give two hoots to a holler as to anybody else's opinion, you're so solidly confident in your own, then you've killed the boy and you've become the man. Then you have found your own voice. You remember when I PM'd you through the back channels, and this is, somewhere around 9 months to a year ago. Hey, Paulo, sounds like somebody's finding his own voice. Well, I've been watching you and some of the questions that you pose and describe and so forth, and this is I'm watching from a third person viewpoint an evolution. Well, this is what happens with all of us. Kelly Warden has found his own voice. You've got Brian Z, Brian Frank, all these other guys have found their own voice. So incredibly confident in what we do that, this is what we do.
So one of the things that I've identified as a recurring theme in martial arts relationships, right, is oftentimes the master and the student would take on the dynamics almost like a father and son, right? Where one would be open to receiving information and guidance. One is happy to provide it. Just like a real father and son relationship. But here's where it diverges, and this is where I identify a great source of pain for many martial artists. In that, you know, I have a son, he's 16. I've guided him for all of his life. And when he becomes his own man and wants to do his own thing and differentiate himself from how I did things, that will cause me a little bit of pain, but I am his father. I will support it continually. Go forth, son, do your own thing, become your own man. That, when it's time for that part in the student master relationship, the master kind of turns a little bit because it isn't a real father and son relationship. And all of a sudden, he sees his son as a threat. Not unlike a father and son might experience that same dynamics, but because it isn't a real father and son relationship, the master might often call the progress and almost sabotage the son's journey into branching out. And all of a sudden you're exiled from the system and you're no longer part of the family. That's one of the things that I've identified to be a recurring theme in martial arts, this facade of a father-son relationship with all the benefits. But when it comes time to that hard part of a real father and son relationship, it turns real ugly. So let me ask you this. Okay, because you mentioned some names yourself, Datu Kelly, Brian Zwolinski, who have found their own identities and voices within Modern Arnis.
Yeah.
Do you think if Professor Remy was alive today, that would have caused a butting of heads between you guys and the professor? Would he have said, hey, man, you're adding too much judo into this? Or Dan, your karate is starting to really come out too much. This is what I want you to do. Do you think there would have been a separation? And
that, you know, that's a really good question because experientially, I'll tell you just what happened with me. And you know, like I said, I petitioned him, form a subsystem, went off the seminar circuit, and when I first heard about his affliction, okay, I had heard about it through a different party, not one of the people who are basically an IMAF. And when I talked to her later on, I said, you know, hey, Gabi, you know what? We have something to settle because how come you didn't tell me that Remy was sick? And she had this amazed look on her face. As well, he told us that you had retired. I'm kind of like, what? I'd never retired. You know, I had stopped going to a lot of the seminars, etc. So it may have been something where, let's say, yeah, this happened. Dan was splitting off. Dan was going his own way. So therefore, he's going to say something about, or he could have thought, hey, Dan hasn't been showing up lately. Well, perhaps, I don't know. I suppose he's retired. I mean, who knows? I never heard anything negative through the grapevine, etc. Yeah. So, but you know, I think, and this is just my thinking. I think he would have, let's say, if I were to do that, and he was still alive and so forth, he'd probably, you know, pat me on the back, say, "Go forth, my boy. Come back when you're ready," etc. He didn't seem to have a tremendous amount of possessiveness as a grandmaster, as a leader. Yeah.
Gotcha. That's a good way to characterize that, because I see it all the time. Yeah. I see it all the time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Well, you know, the thing that many people have bought into is that when you're an underbelt student or low-ranking student or inexperienced student, there's this heavy reliance on the source of your information, and then you develop a personal relationship. So now you've got this reliance on this person who you're personally attached, and as you know, any instructor loves a great student. And when I say a great student, I mean somebody who's in there pitching, somebody who's in there really working on the stuff, taking what they're in. So there ends up being this kind of symbiotic relationship. But again, like I mentioned earlier in the interview, the moment you enter human beings into the mixing bowl, you're going to get differences of opinion. You're going to get people who grow. You know, I hated when my little girl moved out. But then again, she was either 18 or 19. She was being a young woman. And it's time for her to live her own life. I had the same thing with Tim Gustafson, who was one of my top students, who ended up finding his own voice. And luckily, I was at the stage where I could sit back and go, you go, boy. This is good. I'm really enjoying watching your progress. You're doing stuff that I would never do.
Right.
And I think he checks in about every 6 months just to see what the hell I'm doing and catch up. So
I think you guys were there at the Water and Steel.
Yeah, Water and Steel. That's where you and I first met. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he was there as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah, I was bunking with him.
Okay.
Big guy, immensely talented, very tough.
Seems very smart as well. I've had some conversations with him. Awesome. All right, we're just gonna get
talk to him about business and so forth. And oh boy, the guy's sharp as a tack. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, Tim says you can maintain a structured curriculum while still allowing space for innovation. Would you agree with that? That seems pretty logical.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can maintain a structured curriculum while still allowing space. Is there a super dance system? Do you have a system that is your own that may be influenced by your journey? What is it called? What is that?
The blanket term for what I teach in terms of karate is, American freestyle karate. Now, the entire package is what I would call the Anderson martial arts systems. But when I teach them as very, very separate entities. The MA80 system, my branch of Modern Arnis does not spill it over into my karate guys. My karate guys don't learn stick work, etc. They're very, very separate entities. But when I look at innovation, I look at the person's personal expression. So let's say you have a structured curriculum and you've got your white through black belt, okay, and you get one person who specializes in disarms, you get the next person who specializes in knife, you get this next person who comes up with a different wrinkle with, let's say, double stick. Okay, here we got that's personal innovation, and the thing about personal innovation is that it ends up being more personal innovation to themselves.
Yeah,
because
I really like that.
How many moves have not been discovered? Good luck. They've all been discovered. Right. So you let them involve with themselves and like that, and not try and pigeonhole them.
Yeah, I like that bridge that you created between innovation and personal expression. I think that makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, we're different personalities. I mean, if I remember right, Paulo, you're probably about an inch and a half shorter than I am. I'm 5'9". How tall are you?
5'8".
Okay, good. And what do you weigh?
Currently, I'm about 180 pounds, maybe a little bit less. I'm fasting.
Okay, you and I are in the same ballpark weight wise. I think I'm about 185, and so we have similar but slightly different structural body types. Now, you've had experience in Pikini, which means you have a skill set of motion that's going to be different than what I got from Modern and from my exploits in karate. So your adaptation, et cetera, and your innovation is going to be very Paulo-like. Right. Well, mine's going to be very Dan-like. And are there going to be new moves? Not really. They've all been done by the guys who preceded us. But are they going to be something that fires the light bulb on over the top of your head? Bing. Oh, hey, I haven't done it like this before. Let me check this shit out. and so forth. So, within the structured curriculum of anybody's, whether it's Bikini, your own, or a modern, Calice Illustrissimo, you're going to have that. And, that's where it's going to pop up.
Agreed. And there, even though if we were to reduce Filipino martial arts and really boil it down, there would still be close to an infinite combination of those fundamentals and those sequences, those drills, the way that we disseminate and deliver that information and the way that we express it is going. Everyone, I think, is personally innovative if they would only see it under that lens. I think a lot of people like to be sort of spoon-fed and feel like they have to follow almost a paint by numbers sort of protocol when it comes to learning Filipino martial arts. But this whole personal expression and personal innovation thing, I think it's a critical element in the core of all Filipino martial arts.
I believe so too, but it also depends upon the desire of the person. Okay, what does the person want to do with his art? If the guy takes it up as a hobby and not as a lifelong type of thing, okay, they'll want to be spoon-fed. Why? Because they're doing 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week, and then they go home and they watch Netflix, or they end up, working on playing the guitar, which is what I'm doing now, and so it all depends on what their desires are and what they're doing. Hey, Belton, and I missed Jeremy. Hey, Jeremy. Hi, guys. I mean to say hello. Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, we are very key in preserving the spirit, and we just all preserve it in our own different ways.
Oh my goodness! All right. Well, let's see who else we got here. By the way, Kurt made a correction. Not Game of Thrones. That quote was from Dune.
Oh, was that Dune? Whoops. Well, there you go.
There we go. Belton. He's
Belton found his voice. I love it, Belton. Way to go, buddy. You're in Thailand. Ay.
Yeah, Belton's special human being.
He's a good egg. He and I, not at the Water and Steel that you were at, but at the next one, he and I swapped as being ukes for each other.
Okay.
And so, I was when I did a segment on a certain way of striking. He was my guy, and then when he did a particular combination he taught, I was his boy. It was good fun.
But yeah, those Water and Steel seminars are extraordinary. I've only ever been to one. I got to go back. Just a collection.
Well,
it's phenomenal.
Well, that was actually the first one that I had ever gone to, and I went up specifically as a student. So it wasn't like, and I didn't even tell anybody. I think I told Kelly and I told Tim, and I wanted to see what it was like, because you look at the ads Kelly puts out and it sounds like almost a biker's convention, no tap out in the street, eat gravel, and all this hard guy crap, right? But the thing is that what a community. The instructors were very real deal in their viewpoint, but it wasn't coming from I'm going to grab your face and shove it in the gravel type of thing. There wasn't any of the egos, etc. It was absolutely brilliant. And
the way, listen, go ahead. Was really touching to me, because it was a collection. The one that I went to, Rod Coulter, Belton,
Bob Anderson.
Bob Anderson is awesome. Ryan,
yes, he is.
So there was Professor Leonard Trigg. How can I forget?
Leonard and I go back to when he and I were both under belts.
Yeah. He was incredible. But what I was saying was that despite this collection of different influences, the way that the community, and at that time, because you went there as a student, and I want to get back to that, but I mean, there were moments of silence for Professor Remy. There were so many moments where he was acknowledged and his spirit was honored in that event. It was quite touching for me, even as an outsider. I was like, wow, there's a lot of history going through this seminar, and it's incredible.
Oh yeah, very much so. And pardon me for the wobbly on the camera. I'm putting on a coat. I'm starting to freeze out here. One of the interesting things, and I've never heard anybody else say this, and this shows you the amount of respect that Kelly has for Professor Remy, and that is, after learning Modern Arnis, he discarded everything that he had learned and started analyzing it through a Modern Arnis perspective. And it's like, you mean you tossed out everything? He tossed out everything. It's like, holy moly. And so the impact that Professor Remy had on him is really quite outstanding. And he shows it, he demonstrates it, and he readily acknowledges it. And like you said, that came up a lot in the Water and Steel. So all good.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap this up, you just mentioned that you went to that seminar as a student, right? Just to see
nobody knew, hardly anybody knew me. It was great. I was just this old man who was out in the field training. It was really good.
I'm going back to our private messages on Instagram, and September 3rd, 2019, this was just after, I wrote to you, your enthusiasm is contagious and your thirst for knowledge is inspiring. I observed you asking questions immediately after a demonstration, not to interject your ideas, but to gain a deeper understanding of theirs.
Thank you.
Can scroll back and find that. I meant it. I didn't know who you were. I had no idea who you were. I was like, whoa, look at this dude.
Well, I remember because Craig Jorgensen introduced us. And I didn't know who you were. It says, yeah, he's got this podcast. He's got a million viewers and so forth. And it's like, okay, hi, how you doing? And then we spent like a minute and a half, and then wham, you're out somewhere else, and I was out somewhere else. Yeah. And it was, but yeah, it's funny. I'll relate an interesting story, which was when I went back to the Philippines. In 2006, Brian Zawolinsky, okay. Now, he had only met me like once or twice. And he was amazed that any class that I did not teach, I was in somebody else's class. I mean, I trained my ass off. I trained my ass off there. And that's, I mean, that's kind of how I am. If I'm going to go somewhere and really enjoy the luxury of being a student.
Yes, sir.
And the cool thing about being a student is I can screw up and it doesn't mean a hill of beans. I can be the biggest white belt in the class, all that. And I tell you, that is such a relief. But yeah, it's kind of part of my nature. I mean, it might be different to other people and so forth, that perhaps they sit at the back of the hall or, but I like getting out on the floor, and if I get out on the floor and it's out of my comfort zone, hey, that's even better. That's even, because that adds to the toolbox. That adds to the mental toolbox. Plus, the other thing is that so far, and I'll say so far, I've succeeded in my attempts to make myself approachable. And I think as a student, one makes themselves approachable. So there you go.
I definitely agree with that. And it was only after a conversation, or I think I forgot who it was, but like, you know what that guy is, right? That's Super Dan. I'm like, who the hell is Super Dan?
So who's the Super Dan guy? That's right. Different generation. Yeah. All good.
anyway, thank you for having this conversation with me. I know we had planned it for a while, and yeah, I think it was one of my posts today that I think
Yeah, it was one of your posts that I messaged you in the back channels, and yeah, you're talking about the multiplicity of drills, and these are my words, not yours, but the multiplicity of drills getting in the way of actual function, and how people stick to them sometimes, and so forth. And I made a comment that that you appreciated, and then of course I went through the back channels. Hey, are we ever going to do this interview? Because I mean, we've been batting it back and forth like playing tennis, but we haven't never scheduled it until you said, well, we can do it this morning. I'm kind of going, well, I hope the internet connection out here is good, and I hope my wife forgives me.
It almost didn't happen, but this is how I like to do my interviews. And you know, we were just going to do a test run, and we got to talking, and I think 5-10 minutes into it, I'm like, look, man, this is great. This is how I do things anyway. There's no preparation. Let's get out there and just have a conversation. And that's what we did.
Sounds good. The only thing that's missing on my end is a cup of coffee. I see you've got yours. So there you go.
To get me a couple of refills too. Well,
I'll get me a refill once we're off. So there you go.
There we go. Well, is there anything else? Any let's leave with this. Any parting words for the Modern Arnis and the broader Filipino martial arts community?
I'm waving hi to my granddaughter. Yeah, I'm going to go back to Bruce Chutnick. To preserve the art, preserve the spirit. And the other thing is, whichever instructor that you gravitate towards and that you feel a really good personality connection with, connect up with them. The art is beautiful. The art is amazing. And Remy taught enough people that there will be somebody that you definitely like and gravitate towards, and just explore the art. It's terrific. Oh, buy my books. I had to have a sleazy sales pitch in there. Buy my stuff.
Because again, I'm super unprepared with this stuff. I'll put some links up on the podcast of this. But yeah, awesome. Thank you. It was good to talk to you about all of these things, and hopefully this won't be the last time we chat about it.
No, good chatting with you. And at some time when we actually get in the same physical space, I'd love to play.
Absolutely. That would be
love to play. It'd be good fun. Okie dokie. Good enough.
Go spend time
with guys. Boom.
Take care, guys. All right. That was pretty cool. And we got a couple more messages here. Belton, we talk about masters and students. Water and Steel was an example of how Datu allowed and supported us in showcasing our experiences and vast knowledge we gained over the years. Yeah, still, I've only been to one. Definitely one of those. I mean, it should be on everybody's bucket list to make it to at least one. Some people have been going to this friggin' Water and Steel training camp for years. The one that I went to was the 39th annual. I believe there's been one other since then because of the whole that stuff that happened with the whole world, and I don't want to say it because in this video might get flagged. Pandemic, vaccines. Oh crap. Anyway, yeah, that was a great conversation. That was really awesome. Thank you guys for watching, and yeah, share this video with people in Modern Arnis. Or just Filipino martial arts. I think there was a lot of gems in that conversation. So thank you guys again. And yeah, hope you guys have a great day.